Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Fred Nauer. I'm the Chief Flight Instructor at Thunderbird Aviation. And I'd like to welcome you to the monthly safety seminar that we try to put on here as far as the aviation side is concerned. Let's wait just a couple more minutes to make sure nobody else is signing in right at the last minute here, and then we'll get started. So again, welcome to the Thunderbird Aviation monthly safety seminar. This month, we're going to be talking about aircraft weight and balance on beyond just the weight times arm equals moment kind of stuff. I'm going to go through some of the terms that I've gleaned out of the FAA weight and balance handbook. And believe it or not, there is a handbook just for the weight and balance side of things. And then go through some examples of how to calculate weight and balance. We're not going to do a whole lot of math today because I know there's nothing worse than trying to watch somebody do math on a computer screen. So we'll just go through the basics of what you're kind of looking for as far as that's concerned. And terms we'll talk about today will be empty weight, or the various types of empty weight that can be included in the aviation world, depending on how old your airplane is. Talk about the datum line, arm, and moment. As far as calculating weight and balance, we'll go through the basic methods, both the moment method that Cessna seems to like to have in their early POHs, and then the arm method that's the one that I use most often, even if it's just an old Cessna too. I'll show you how the MyFBO system, the scheduling system that we have at Thunderbird Aviation, will give you a weight and balance calculator that you can use so that you don't have to do all the math. You just got to type in numbers. I'll show you how that works on ForeFlight and the various Cirrus systems that are available as far as being able to calculate weight and balance without having to pull out your calculator. So when we're talking about weight and balance, the term for aircraft weight has, believe it or not, 3 different ways of defining what an aircraft weight is. The general aviation folks, the gamma folks, have defined standard empty weight as the weight of the standard airplane, including unusable fuel, full operating fluids, and full oil. I have not seen many, this may be, I have not seen many training airplanes that use this type of weight, because we need to add at least one more thing to this process. But the full operating fluids, if you have a airplane that has retractable gear, the hydraulic fluid in the gear system is included in the standard empty weight. The fluid in the brake system, if you have a hydraulic brake system, that fluid is included. The fluid in the struts for the shock absorbing of the oleo struts, also included. In older aircraft, there's just an empty weight, just the airplane, the engines, permanently stalled equipment, and unusable fuel. So you have to add the oil in as part of your weight and balance calculations. The one that is happening most often now is called the basic empty weight, which according to the general aviation folks is the standard empty weight plus optional equipment. So if you're asked this question, if you're flying an airplane that has a basic empty weight as part of its weight and balance calculation, when you're asked the question on a check ride, the answer is basic empty weight includes the aircraft itself, unusable fuel, which in most airplanes is about 2 gallons, full oil, operating fluids, and the optional equipment. The optional equipment, I read that as like the radios. So if you change the radio out in your airplane, you don't have to reweigh the whole airplane. You just have to do the math to get the new basic empty weight and the moment for that weight on the weight and balance document that goes into section 6 of your POH in the airplane. This slide here shows us that everything that needs to go on in order to weigh the airplane in the first place, or if major changes have been happening to the airplane, then you're going to have to reweigh the airplane to get a new basic empty weight starting point, and then you can do the math from there. And like I said, this is not going to be a math day, but this is also a shameless plug, because next week on Saturday at the same time, we're going to have a maintenance seminar on Zoom with Paul Block, our Thunderbird Director of Maintenance. He's going to talk about oil changes, but since we have to wait for the oil to drain out of the system while we're waiting for that to happen, he's also going to talk about how an aircraft is weighed in the first place. So we'll have all the scales and all the process, and we'll go through this whole thing about weighing the left wheel and the right wheel and the nose wheel and all the math and everything that goes in is involved in that. We'll be going through that next week at 1 p.m. next Saturday here on Zoom. Just the same place you found out about this meeting, you'll be able to find out about that one. You'll be able to sign up using the FAA-safety.gov website or the emails and stuff that Thunderbird sends out. The next term is the datum, which is an imaginary vertical plane that basically the engineer figures out where we're going to measure everything from in order to be able to figure out what weight and balance is. So we have to, so it depends on the airplane. Most of the Pipers that I fly, the Warrior, the Archer, and the Arrow that we have here at Thunderbird, the datum is the pointy end of the spinner. And everything, so everything in the airplane then is a positive number, and you're going, and so that all the stuff that would you be using to figure out what the weight and balance is would all be a positive number. In the Cessna world, they use the firewall. So in this kind of in the Cessna world, if you had an old Cessna with an empty weight and you had to add the oil, then the oil would be a negative number to add to work into the weight and balance system. And then some airplanes like this miscellaneous thing that I found online, sometimes the datum is 12 inches in front of the whole airplane and doesn't touch anything. But as long as wherever the engineer drew the line in the first place, as long as everything's measured from that point, then everything and all the charts are based on that number, then everything works out. So then the arm is a distance from that datum to the center of gravity of the item, the middle of the seats, the fuel, the baggage compartment, just like this picture here. This is a Cessna 172 picture I found online. The front seats are, the average is arm of 37 inches after the datum line, which is the firewall. But if you've got a short person and he's all the way up to the front, you could say, okay, let's use that seat as 34. And the other person's kind of long-legged, so they got to slid all the way back. It could be back to 46. So it just depends on how accurate you want to be when you're doing your weight and balance calculation. Rear seat 73, and as you can see, the different baggage areas there. Then the moment according to the weight and balance handbook, is to shorten the terms down here, basically a rotational force. Kind of like all those teeter-totter questions that we had when we were going for our private or commercial rating, how to the rotational force. How much force does the weight of the object apply to the balance of the airplane, basically? And here's where we get the weight times arm equals moment formula that everybody is very, very familiar with. You take the weight of the item that you have, multiply it times the arm, the distance away from the datum, and that will be the moment of that item in order to be able to figure out to help you figure out the weight part and the balance part of the weight and balance problem. The center of gravity then is a specific type of arm. It has various ideas and theories or various definitions as far as the airplane itself is concerned. If you were able to put a strap around the airplane right at the center of gravity that you calculated for your airplane that day, and were able to lift the aircraft off the ground, then it's the point at which the airplane would balance. It would be perfectly balanced as you lifted it off the ground. It's also the theoretical spot where all the weight of the airplane is concentrated, and it goes right straight down towards the center of the earth through the bottom of the airplane. To get this, you take the total moment after you've done all the weight and balance calculations that we're going to go through here in just a second. You take the total moment of the airplane divided by the total weight of the airplane, and that gives you the center of gravity. So, how to calculate the weight and balance? There's various methods that we can use, and we'll go through each one of them in order here. So just give you a general idea of how to make all this stuff work. The one that Cessna was using in its early POHs was what I call the moment divided by 1,000 method. What they did was create this was back in the days before calculators, so they tried to figure out a way to make the numbers as small as they possibly could when you were doing your weight and balance calculation. So you'd have a chart like this. I apologize for the fuzziness of the picture here, but so basically what you do is you have each line, one for the pilot and the front passenger, one for the fuel, one for the rear passengers, and one for the baggage in this airplane. And this picture here must be from back in the days of empty weight, because it only has a line for the oil on the negative side. So obviously full oil in this airplane is about 40 pounds. So you figure out how much the airplane weighs, how much each thing weighs, and then you add for the pilot and the front passenger. If you add both those weights together, for example, here on my picture, if you got 280 pounds of people in the front seat, you run that over to the pilot and front passenger line, and they bring it right straight down, and they'll give you the moment divided by 1,000, which in this case is about 9.5. Then you would do the same thing for the fuel, for the total amount of gas in the airplane, run it over to the line. Obviously 240 pounds in this airplane would be the max weight of the fuel, full fuel. And then you do the same thing for the rear passenger and the baggage passenger, and you just set up a little grid for yourself, one column for weights and one column for the moment divided by 1,000. And then you add up all the weights and add up all the moments, and then check the weight and balance envelope for calculations using moment divided by 1,000. So the maximum weight of this airplane is about 2450, it looks like, if you want to fly in the normal category. The normal category, just a reminder, is a category of aircraft that allows you to fly to a positive 3.8 Gs or to a negative 1.52 Gs in some airplanes. The Piper airplanes don't like you to go negative, or they haven't tested it to the negative side, so there's 3.8 down to 0. But I remember the Cessnas were 3.8 positive to a negative 1.52 negative. And what does that mean? Well, it means if you have the full 2450 weight of the airplane and you pull all the way up to the maximum Gs of 3.8, the wings are holding 9,310 pounds up in the air at that point. So they're stressed to that point and probably a little bit farther to make sure you don't rip the wings off as you're flying, if you decide to go out there and see what 3.8 Gs really feels like. If you want to fly in the utility category, because you want to go to 4.4 Gs or to a negative 1.76 Gs for some reason, obviously then you're going to be in a much more restricted area of the weight and balance envelope here. The max weight is only going to be 2,100 pounds. But the interesting thing I noticed is the reason that they bring the weight down so much is because when you multiply 2,100 times the 4.4 Gs, you almost get the exact same number. So the wings, so basically the weight that is the max weight in the utility category is a definite, is limited by the amount of weight that the wings can hold up in the first place. The one that most people are familiar with is the weight times arm method. The grid, this is from the Piper situation, or it might even be from the FAA testing situation, where you have the weight, the arms are already listed there in the middle column, so that you figure out the weight of the people, multiply it times the arm to get the moment. And when you add up all the weights, starting with the basic empty weight of the airplane and all the weights in there, then you can figure out the total moment divided by the total weight and get the center of gravity there. We'll go through some examples in a computerized version of this in just a few minutes. If you want to do the Cessna though, which back when it only had the moment divided by 1,000, you want to set up your own grid to do the weight times arm method. Like we saw before, we have the ability to figure out what the arms of all the seats and everything are, but it doesn't have anything on this picture or in anything that I found in those old POHs for the fuel system. So then you had to go back to the moment divided by 1,000 grid and figure out, okay, so if I had full tanks, what would the moment divided by 1,000 be? And then multiply that number, which would be 11.4 times 1,000, and then divide that moment divided by the weight of the fuel of 240, and come up with a arm of 47.5. So then you could add that to your grid to create a weight times arm equals moment type grid to figure out what your weight and balance is. So the front seat would be 37, back seat 73, baggage area 1 is 95, and 2 is 123 if you're putting stuff up on the little hat area in the back there, and the moment for the fuel would be 47.5. Then you don't have to, then you can do the chart like this to do all the calculations that you need for the weight and balance. Then once you've got all the weights added up, the moment added up, divide the total moment by the total weight, and then you can go to a grid like this, the weight and balance envelope for airplanes that have the weight times arm equals moment type situation. Now the reason this thing looks like so weird is the numbers, the inches are so inches after datum for the center of gravity is so close on the bottom and so wide at the top, is because this also used to be one of those plastic things that they would give you when you bought the airplane. So you just moved a little piece around on a plastic grid, and it would give you whether you're within weight and balance or not. So sometimes you have to be very careful when you're trying to figure out exactly where you are on this grid when you're figuring out your weight and balance. So you got the same thing. For this airplane, we have a max weight of about 2336, and the utility category is just over 2,000 pounds. Again, probably because of the limits on the weight of the airplane, or the amount that the wings can hold up. Just a reminder for the aviation side of things, if you're on the forward side, within the envelope, but on the forward side of the CG envelope, just remember your aircraft is more stable. It's going to be easier to fly. You'll be able to fly with just, maybe a knot or two more speed, but you're giving up a little more, you're giving up some fuel use in that situation, because in order to be able to counteract that forward CG, you have to have more of a tail downforce, which means you have to trim the whatever, use your elevator trim or stabilator trim to counteract that forward CG, and that's going to create more drag on the airplane. So you kind of almost a wash on exactly how, what's going to happen, with your CG forward. And just remember, if the CG is aft, the airplane is going to be less stable. It's the first time you've flown with an aft CG because you got a lot of stuff in the baggage compartment. You're still within the limit, but it's aft, way farther aft than you're used to. The airplane is going to be a little less stable, so it maybe bumps around a little bit more in turbulence. The controls are going to feel a little bit lighter when you're doing that because the center of gravity is closer to the elevator. The center of gravity is closer to the rudder, so the movement of the rudder and the elevator or the stabilator is going to feel a little bit lighter than you're used to, and that's it. And because of that short arm between the center of gravity and those flight controls, the airplane will be easier to stall. So, and if it's way too far forward, then then you have problems of being able to pull the nose up when you're coming in for a landing. If it stalls, it'll be real easy. It'll recover from the stall real easy, but you may not be able to bring the nose up again. If it's too far aft, past the aft limit, if the airplane gets into a stall, you may not have enough elevator authority to get the nose down to break the stall. So that's one of the many things that they're testing when they're getting the airplanes together in order to be able to get the information together. Hang on just a second here. So now, let me unshare this one and share a different screen. If you're a renter at Thunderbird Aviation and have been put in our system, you can go in there and to the scheduling system, and it gives you the information about the schedules and that type of thing. But the home button, the home tab here, gives you all sorts of neat things that are addition to the scheduling stuff, including calculators. We have every airplane listed that we rent listed in the system here. And let's try this one, because this one will be the same that I'm going to use in ForeFlight. So you click the number, the tail number, the airplane you're going to be flying that day, and click the Go tab. If you've put your information into the system and you've signed in under your name, then will automatically add the weight of you into the front seat, because obviously they think you're going to be the one flying the airplane. Now, there's some extra things you have to do here before you start throwing in weights and stuff, is make sure that you have all the seats set up correctly. Oh, just got to put a number in there. That's right, Fred. So you got to select passenger 2 and put in their weight. And then make sure they're still in C1, then select the next passenger and put in their weight. This is why I'm not doing it by hand here, but then you got to select the row that they're in, and then the last passenger and put in their weight and put in their row. And if that's all you're doing, just giving people rides, then you go down here, and down here in the fuel, if you're riding with full tanks, and you put in 48, because that's the full amount of gas, but you're riding with less gas, you can just put in the number of gallons in there, and it automatically calculates the fuel weight for you, multiplying that the fuel weight times 6. Then you hit the calculate the weight and balance button, and putting 4 people in a Piper Warrior with almost full tanks of gas makes the airplane weigh too much. And so then you'll get this little sign that we have up here on the top saying things aren't working out. So we can go in here and try to fly with the less gas. Come on here. the cool thing about doing it computer-wise, you can change things around real quick and see if we can make things work out better. It looks like we're gonna have to send somebody home. So then, once everything works out, then the weight and balance report link will come up, and it gives you both the moment envelope and the regular envelope. And the nice thing about this one is it gives you the weight and balance at the beginning of this flight and where it's going to be when the flight is empty, because you always, if you go, especially if you're going cross country someplace, figure out what your weight and balance is going to be for takeoff and when it's going to be when you land. So you could be able to figure out what your weight's going to be when you land, so they figure out where you are on this continuum here to figure out where you're going to be when you land. And if this line goes outside the envelope, then you'll know that when you coming in for a landing, you may have a too far forward CG or too far aft, depending on which side it's on, but most likely be too far forward. So then you want to make changes before you take off in the first place to make sure that you have all this stuff taken care of. You can then print this out if you're connected to a printer someplace, so that you can have this information with you just in case the FAA ever asks, did you do a weight and balance? Or you can link it to the reservation, and then it's put in our computer system. And as long as your reservation is still in the system, it will be there for you to look at. So again, pick the airplane that you're flying, select go, and then just start typing in the numbers. And I'm not going to go through the weight change formulas or the moving of weight formulas, because now with all these calculator things out here, it's just a whole lot easier to be able to just move stuff around in here and say, okay, instead of taking all 4 people at once, we're just going to go out there with 2 people, and I'll come back, and then we'll send the other 2 people. Then we'll do 3 flights today. And each person will be able to get a ride in the front seat. So now, looking at my iPad, going to ForeFlight. In the more section of ForeFlight, there is a weight and balance section. I'm not going to go through all the stuff that you need to do to set this up in the first place, but the nice thing about ForeFlight is they have the system is set up that if you have a tail number that's certificated in the United States, then they will look up what type, category, and class of aircraft that is, and automatically set up the weight and balance section in the system for you. And then, so then when you're going in to figure out when you start flight planning a plan for a specific aircraft, that aircraft will automatically appear in the weight and balance section. And the weight and balance screen looks exactly like this. It's a weight times arm equals moment type situation. But the nice thing about this one, instead of having to wait until all the calculation is completed, you can do this. It will calculate your weight and balance as you go. So the same thing here, you just, oops, let me get the right spot here. So over on my iPad, if I tap on pilot, you can even personalize it and put the name of the person in there. But for the weight, you just put in how much they weigh. And let's see if this, nice thing about this one is, well, let's do this. Do it just like last time. So it's the same airplane that we were doing in my FBO. And then click save. And already the weight is moved. Co-pilot. Save that. And right now we're already weighing too much. So we're going to have to Change the weight of the air, change the weight of the fuel, save that. It brings us back down into the weight and balance envelope. And we probably know right now that if we add one more person in here, oh, because they're in the back seat, they're moving backwards, so that helps. Let's see if we can get another person in here. Oh, and now we went out too far again. So the nice thing about doing it with the four-flight system is it gives you information immediately as you're going through the system here to figure out whether you're within weight and balance or not. So we're going to take that person off and bring us back into the system here. So again, it gives you the takeoff fuel, where you're going to be at zero fuel, and if you have a flight plan already put into the system, it'll draw the square where you're going to be when you come in for a landing. So this will also be able to give you your landing weight and balance. If you're flying in an airplane that ForeFlight doesn't recognize, there is a setup section in here where you can go through and plug in all the numbers and everything that you need in order to be able to create the weight and balance envelope and give it the arms and everything of all the seats and all. Why is it not moving? There it is. Put in all the arms of all the seats, and then, but even so, when you're putting in even if you're using the automated system by putting in the N number of a certificated airplane that ForeFlight recognizes, you'll still have to go down here in the bottom and put in the empty weight and the moment at that weight. So you got to go into section 6 of your weight and balance manual in order to be able to figure out, to put that information in there so it knows where to start from when it's doing the weight and balance calculation. So back to this. So those two are two of the calculation side that you can do. The rest of them are just going to be examples. I wrote down Cirrus app, but as I look through this, I also realized that there's all sorts of apps. If you have an iPad or any type of smartphone, there are apps all over the place that you can get online. I was going to demonstrate the free app that somebody built for the Cirrus aircraft to show you what the weight and balance is like for a Cirrus aircraft, but they must have stopped updating the system because I can't get the thing to open up. But there are free apps out there that you can use. The one that I'm showing here, this Geronimo company makes weight and balance systems and takeoff and landing distances and all that type of stuff for all sorts of various aircraft. And but they charge $18.99 a piece for each one of theirs. And it does basically the same thing. You type in all the numbers in the appropriate spots for where the people are, putting in the fuel in the airplane down there on the bottom, and it automatically adjusts the weight and balance as you're going along there. If you have a little bit more money to spend, you can get this Cirrus Perspective Plus type weight and balance calculator that's connected to the Cirrus SR22 and I believe the SR20 newest versions. The only problem with doing getting this calculator in your hands is you got to buy the whole airplane because it's part of the perspective system in the airplane itself. So it's going to cost you for a base price of $679,900. That's the base price. None of them are sold like that. But the cool thing about this one is, when you get out to the airplane, if you forgot to do the weight and balance, you can do it right there inside the aircraft. On the MFD side, one of the selections that you can make is the weight and balance of the airplane. It'll automatically put the fuel in for you because it's got the fuel sensors in the airplane. It knows how much gas is in there, and you just select and plug in all the other numbers over there on the airplane side there, and it'll give you the grid on the screen there to let you know whether you're within weight and balance even before you take off. There is a Garmin app that is free with in-app purchases. I believe the weight and balance section, to add the weight and balance stuff to the Garmin application that you get for iPad or your smartphone is, or any tablet, I believe. Then you can, most, those students that don't have iPads and don't want to use, so they can't use ForeFlight because ForeFlight doesn't do anything except iPads, have tried to use, or have been using the Garmin app. But I believe in order to be able to do the weight and balance, it's sort of the same thing we just looked at in the perspective, because that's a Garmin product too, also. Then you can probably have to make an extra purchase to do the weight and balance calculations in there for that one. AOPA has an excellent flight planner. If you just want to use their flight planner on the web, they do have a way to upgrade it and put it on your tablet or your smartphone. It's a base price of $49.99, but if you're a member, they'll take $10 off. And in order to be able to do the weight and balance calculation that they have in the AOPA flight planner, you're going to have to do the upgrade, because that's where the weight and balance section is, inside there. So I know this isn't exactly an hour, but there's not a whole lot to talk about here. But I'll open it up to if anybody has any questions. My next seminar will be in October. I know I've been doing these monthly, but next month is the end of the quarter, and I'm the Chief Flight Instructor, and I have to do all the check rides for the people coming up before their DPE check ride, if they're graduating from the Part 141 school that we have. So I have to do all of their check rides before they end up going to the DPE. So September is going to be a busy month for me. So I'm going to skip September, but in October, I don't think it's the 14th. I think it was the 9th. Like the second Saturday in October, whatever that is. I think it's October 9th. I'll be doing a seminar on ForeFlight basics. I'll talk about the flight planning and all the stuff that we sort of skimmed at today, and a little bit more detail about how to set up the airplane on the in the ForeFlight system itself. And we'll go through all things ForeFlight in my next seminar. Are there any questions, comments, concerns at this point? Any questions? We have a question here in the chat to talk about the effects of forward and aft CG on aircraft performance. Like I said in the slides, if the CG is forward, it's going to be more stable. But like I said, in the weight and balance handbook and in the pilot's handbook of aeronautical knowledge, it talks about how it's going to affect the forward CG makes the airplane more stable, which is, that is a good thing. But because of the CG is to the forward side of the limit, it's farther away from the center of lift, which is the force that the tail down force that's created by the stabilator or the horizontal stabilizer needs to create in order to be able to balance the airplane and make the airplane more stable. So if you have a forward CG, even though it's more stable, and you may be able to get a couple more knots out of the airplane because it'll be able to fly faster, it's going to be counteracted by the amount of drag that's going to be created in order for the tail down force. The position of the elevator, the stabilator needs to be in order to be able to create enough tail down force to balance out that forward CG position. On the in the aft CG, like I said, the airplane is more unstable. The flight controls are a lot lighter. And so, for me, it becomes a little bit more squirrely to fly because we're usually not used to flying with an airplane with FCG. Is that what you were looking for? Whoever typed this in? And I realize I'm just sort of repeating myself. Did you have any more information that you've heard?
Oh, sorry if all that was redundant. I did come in late to the meeting. I didn't know if you covered that. Thank you.
Not a problem. Does that make sense?
No. I would think the airplane flies faster with an aft CG because there's less downloading on the leading edge of the wing.
Yeah, that's one of those aeronautical things that, sometimes you just have to take at face value. It's because of the where the center of gravity is compared to the center of lift is what causes it to be able to get a couple more knots out of the thing, because the aircraft basically, I think it's more of a situation. What's the word? It has more to do with the center of gravity compared to the center of lift. That's because it's farther forward, allows the airplane to lower the nose a little bit and thus give you a little bit better airspeed. Not a whole lot, but just some of the articles I read, sometimes it says if you bring it all the way forward, you may get 1 or 2 knots extra airspeed out of the airplane. It's not that big a deal.
What does what's CG placement do to stalling speed?
If the CG is farther forward, the aircraft is more stable. Let me think for a second. Let me get it straight. I mean, the biggest problem with an aft CG is the arm between the center of gravity and now the elevator or the stabilator in the back is shorter. And so the problem with that one is, in some situations, if the airplane stalls, it's going to be harder to get the nose down. If the center of gravity is aft of the aft limit, you may not have enough elevator or stabilator authority to get the nose to come down in the first place, and you may not be able to get out of the stall.
I agree with that, but what does that do to stalling speed, though? Do we stall at a higher speed or a lower speed with the forward or FCG?
I think with the FCG, the stalling speed is faster than normal.
So an FCG raises stalling speed?
I believe so.
Okay.
Anybody else have a different idea on that? I'm having a senior moment right now.
I think that would make sense, Fred, because it'd be an accelerated stall.
Yeah.
Fred, I have a question. Do the DPEs want to see you do the calculations by hand? Do they want to make sure you know how to do them by hand, or do they accept the computer versions?
I think if it's a person's private pilot check ride, then they're probably going to want to see them do it by hand. Anything after that, it's probably as long as you know how to use the thing and be able to, whatever calculator you're using it correctly, and it comes up with the correct answer, then they don't care very much. But I think on the private pilot one, they're usually looking for you to have it done by hand. So what I usually tell my students is, do it by hand, but check your work. Go to whatever calculator you have and put in the same numbers and see if it comes up with the same, see if the calculator comes up with the same thing that you did.
Yeah, you can't do it backwards. You can't do it with the calculator and then fill in the manual.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thanks. Good presentation.
Is calculating weight and balance for a part of pre-flight action, and is it required for every flight?
Is there a regulation that says you must do weight and balance every time, that it specifically says you must do the weight and balance every time? No, there's nothing in the regulations that says that, but then there's that, what is it, 91, 91, 113, you must know, be familiar with all things, all aspects of the flight. And so that kind of goes in there. And since the weight and balance is part of the POH, being able, that's all part of the flight, the same thing you're using in section 5 to figure out what your takeoff distance is and what your landing distance is. In some books like the Piper World, you can't do the landing distance until you figure out what your landing weight is. And so it's sort of implied that you must do the weight and balance in order to be able to figure out which chart to use or how to enter the chart for some of the takeoff and landing distance stuff. So yeah, if you're flying with the same person doing the exact same thing over and over again, do you have to do it every time? No, but I'd have the, like I used to do with my students, I'd show them how to do that thing on the MyFBO thing. Then we print the thing out and they say, put this in your logbook. So that when it's you and me and a full tank of gas in the airplane, we know we're within weight and balance. If anybody asks, we'll show them the piece of paper. Any other questions? Go down to chat here, you got another number.
But I just have a question. How's that cat behind you get up into its where it sits?
Oh, it's got
How do we
quite a
sign
few
up?
steps to go through here. It jumps up on the shelf and then
Oh.
the next shelf up and then finally gets up to the
Oh.
very top.
Oh,
The
all
older it
right.
gets, the longer it takes. So I just checked my calendar again. It is October 9th will be the next seminar. So
Good.
there are no more questions. We'll end today's show. And thank you very much for participating. Remember, next week, if you want to, sign up again on FAAsafety.gov for the maintenance seminar presented by Thunderbird Aviation. There'll be oil changes for all your preventive maintenance kind of guys, but he'll also be showing us how the aircraft is weighed in the first place. We have scales and everything out there because we're weighing some of our airplanes because of the various situations that are going on. So we have the scales and everything all set up, ready to go. We'll show you how the airplane is weighed and kind of make it in conjunction, make these two seminars connected to each other. So thank you. Thank you everybody for attending.